4 trespassers ignored a Marine's warning. 5 seconds later, 2 were in the dirt, and the HOA's worst nightmare began. End quote. I warned them once, but at sunrise that Saturday, a black SUV with no plates rolled past my no trespassing sign like they owned the place. 4 so-called HOA enforcers stepped out and claimed they were here to inspect my barn on my land. 5 minutes later, 2 were on the ground. 1 ran for his life, and my shotgun made it clear the real fight had just begun. That's how folks online like to tell the story now. Short, sharp, and dramatic. But the truth, well, the truth started quiet, real quiet. It was just past 7 o'clock in the morning, the kind of hour where the world still feels half asleep. Out here on my 180 acres, that quiet isn't an accident. It's earned. It comes from distance from fencing, from long gravel roads nobody drives down unless they mean to. It comes from having no HOA, no noise, no neighbors trying to approve the shade of your front door or how often you mow the grass. It comes from a man finally building a life on his own terms. That morning, I was tossing fresh hay to the horses. The sun was low and gold sliding across the field like warm honey. A little mist held onto the tops of the grass, just enough to make the air feel cool on my face. My mare Daisy nudged my shoulder, asking for more than her share. I scratched her neck and heard nothing but the breeze and the soft crunch of hooves shifting on the dirt. Peaceful, predictable, safe. At least until the sound of tires crunching on gravel cut through the air like a knife. Now that sound alone doesn't always mean trouble. Sometimes it's Jerry from up the road delivering a jar of homemade peach jam. Sometimes it's the mail carrier who refuses to walk the half-mile driveway. But I've lived long enough to know this. When a vehicle sounds heavy, slow, and unfamiliar, your body feels it before your mind registers anything. I stood there for a moment, pitchfork in hand, listening. The crunching wasn't hurried, wasn't casual either. It had the rhythm of people who believed they had a right to be wherever they were going, and that right there put a twist in my gut. I wiped my hands on my jeans and made my way toward the front gate. Before I even reached the bend in the road, I saw it, a black SUV, glossy as wet ink, sliding down my driveway like it belonged here. No front plates, no rear plates, windows tinted so dark I could see my own reflection staring back. And then, like the scene was playing out in slow motion, the SUV rolled right past my no trespassing sign without hesitating. Didn't even tap the brakes. I muttered under my breath. Well, that's not a good sign. I've dealt with trouble before overseas in training, and sometimes right here at home. Trouble has a posture, a smell, a way of moving. This SUV, and whoever was inside it, radiated that same kind of tension. But here's something important you should know before the story goes any further. I'd prepared for this day long before it arrived. When you buy land next to a growing HOA, you learn quickly that not all neighbors come with pies and welcome baskets. Some come with clipboards, rules nobody voted on, and ideas about future development plans that don't include your name anywhere. So, I'd installed cameras, 1 at the gate, 1 facing the barn, 1 tucked under the porch roof facing the path. They weren't for decoration. They were for days like this one. As the SUV slowed to a stop on my property line, I felt everything inside me settle, calm, solid, and ready. Not angry, not afraid, just steady the way Marines are trained to be when something's about to break loose. I didn't know who they were yet. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew one thing, for damn sure. They weren't here by accident, and whatever they thought they were about to do, they had picked the wrong ranch to do it on. The SUV stopped just inside my property line, right where the gravel turns darker from years of hoofprints and tractor tires. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The engine hummed low steady, like it was thinking. Then all at once the doors opened. First came the thuds, heavy boots hitting my dirt with an attitude. 3 men got out almost synchronized like they'd rehearsed it. Big guys, thick necks, navy blue shirts with some embroidered emblem on the chest. Not law enforcement, not contractors, something in between, something pretending to be official. Behind them stepped a woman, mid-40s blonde, bob cut so stiff it barely moved. Tailored blazer tablet clutched like a badge, and sunglasses that didn't belong on a ranch at sunrise. She stood there with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire adult life. She glanced around my land like it was an open house she'd been invited to. Then she finally spotted me. Her smile was polite the way a snake's tongue is polite right before it strikes. "Good morning," she called out, voice bright but brittle. "You must be Mr. Drake." I didn't bother smiling back. "Depends who's asking." She walked toward me, clicking across the gravel in heels no sane person would wear out here. "I'm Karen Seifert, Disciplinary Coordinator for the Silver Creek Ranch Homeowners Association." I let that hang in the air for a moment. Silver Creek Ranch was half a mile up the hill, rows of manicured lawns and identical beige houses that looked like they'd been printed from the same suburban copy machine. New people moved in constantly, and with them came rules and meetings and more rules. I'd never attended a single meeting, mostly because my land wasn't in their HOA. Not now, not ever. "Ma'am," I said, arms folded, "you might want to take another look at where you're standing. This here is private property." "Oh, absolutely," she said brightly. "But your parcel lies within our designated visual influence buffer zone." I blinked once. "My what?" She tapped her tablet. "Silver Creek is expanding. Future development plans require aesthetic consistency along all bordering properties, particularly those visible from planned Phase 3 lots." Ah, there it was, the slip the motive. Not the horses, not the fencing, not the smell of hay. They wanted the land. Or, at the very least, they wanted control over it. Karen continued swiping through her screen with the confidence of a woman who expected applause. "We've received several community complaints regarding unauthorized fencing, unregistered livestock structures, and visual disruptions inconsistent with Silver Creek's long-term community vision." I raised an eyebrow. "Visual disruptions? You mean my barn?" One of the men behind her snorted. The big one shaved head shoulders like a refrigerator, took a step forward and scanned my property like a guard dog. Karen lifted her chin. "Mr. Drake, this area is designated for evaluation. We're here to perform an exterior compliance inspection." "No," I said flatly, "you're not." She blinked. "Excuse me. You don't have authority here." I pointed toward the sign they'd blown past. "In fact, that big red sign back there means none of you should even be standing on this dirt." One of the men tallest of the three laughed under his breath. "Sir, we're authorized to inspect perimeter structures on behalf of the HOA. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "You folks lost?" I asked. "Or just ignoring reality on purpose?" Karen held up her tablet like a shield. "We have two possible pathways for resolving this. Option 1, voluntary integration into our HOA. That would grant you voting rights and access to compliance waivers." I stared at her. "Ma'am, I bought this land at a government auction. This land has never been in any HOA." She cleared her throat. "Option 2, we escalate. Daily citations building code enforcement, and if necessary, petition the county for demolition orders." I let out a long, slow breath. Not because I was intimidated, but because I suddenly understood the shape of the storm rolling toward me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a random visit or a simple case of HOA overreach. This was strategy pressure, a first step in a bigger plan. Behind Karen, one of the men drifted toward my porch, raising his phone like he was filming evidence of a crime. The other tugged the chain on my barn gate, rattling it hard enough that Daisy inside tossed her head in alarm. That was enough. I took one step forward, voice low and steady. "You've got 5 seconds to walk back to your SUV." Karen didn't flinch. She actually smiled. "We're here in an official capacity, Mr. Drake." "No, you're trespassing." I cut her off. "You're on private land with no authority touching structures you don't own." The big guy with the shaved head took another step toward me, puffed up like he planned to grab my arm. He didn't know me. He didn't know what I'd done for a living. He didn't know that I was on my own land. I wasn't about to let anyone lay a hand on me, but he was about to learn, and so was Karen. The moment the big guy grabbed the barn gate, something inside me tightened. Not anger, not yet. More like a switch clicking into place. A marine thing. A rancher thing. This is my land thing. The tall one hovered near my porch, phone held high like he was documenting a crime scene. He zoomed in on my boots, then the porch rail, then the horses behind me, as if each frame added weight to whatever report they were planning to file. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear but excitement. People like him love moments where they think they're in control. Meanwhile, the last guy, the one fiddling with my gate, kept yanking the chain, making it rattle against the metal hinge. That sharp clanging scraped across the quiet morning like a blade across glass. Inside the barn, Daisy snorted anxiously. Hooves clacking against the floor. That did it. Nobody rattles my animals, not out here, not on my dirt. Karen didn't notice the shift in my posture, or maybe she noticed and didn't care. She stared at her tablet like she was reading holy scripture handed down from Mount HOA. Then she lifted her chin, adopting a tone that probably worked on frightened homeowners living in beige houses. "Mr. Drake," she said, voice crisp, "we will now proceed with an external compliance sweep per Silver Creek's community expansion plan." "Ma'am," I cut in, "you're not proceeding with anything." She sighed as if I were a stubborn teenager refusing to take out the trash. "We have jurisdiction under future zoning modifications. Your property is considered visually impactful too. There is no future zoning modification." I said, "Not for my land." Karen smiled again, that tight-lipped kind of smile you only see on people who think you're not smart enough to understand the trap they're setting. "Oh, it's not finalized yet," she said, "but it will be. We're simply making sure the transition is smooth." Transition. There was that word again, just like expansion, just like buffer zone, just like aesthetic influence. All of it, code, all of it, pieces of a plan they thought I'd be too slow to notice. Behind me, the gate clanged again harder. My temper nudged forward an inch. The big guy with the shaved head took another step toward me, fists clenched like he was warming up for something stupid. "You think you can stop us?" he muttered. "We're authorized to inspect." "No," I said calmly. "You're not," he snorted. "What are you gonna do? Call your cows out here to help." The other two laughed. Karen didn't. She flicked her tablet, pretending to scroll. "Mr. Drake, if you refuse cooperation, we will note you as non-compliant. This will trigger daily fines, code citations, and possibly an emergency review for unsafe structures. Our legal division has authority to request county involvement." I stared at her for a moment, letting the quiet stretch. She mistook it for hesitation. "Last chance to work with us," she added. "Last chance," I echoed. "For you, walk away." One of the men cracked his knuckles. "He's bluffing." Karen didn't look at him. "Proceed." That one word, proceed, was enough for the tall guy on the porch. He hopped up the steps, shoved his phone almost into my face, and barked, "Step aside, sir. We're going inside." That was when I spoke the sentence that shifted everything. "You're 5 seconds from regretting this decision." Karen rolled her eyes. "We're not here for threats." "Wasn't a threat," I said. It was a countdown. The guy at my porch door reached for the handle. The big guy squared his shoulders like he was preparing to grab me. The chain on the barn gate rattled again. One last sharp metallic clang. That sound, that damn sound, echoed across the yard like a trigger. I felt the old instincts rise. The training from Quantico. The drills, the fights, the quiet clarity that shows up right when the world starts to tilt sideways. Karen was still talking. Something about civil penalties, but the noise faded behind the pulse in my ears. The barn gate rattled one more time. Daisy kicked the stall. I stepped forward. "Enough," I said. The man with the shaved head puffed his chest. Or, what old man, I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just moved. The way I see it, fights never start with fists, not real fights. Real fights start with decisions. And those men made theirs the moment they stepped onto my land, rattled my barn gate, and tried to push past me like I was some doormat they could wipe their boots on. I'd given them every chance to turn around. 5 seconds a clear warning, but some people only understand lessons delivered the hard way. The tall guy on my porch moved first. He reached for my door handle. My door, like he had the right to walk into my home. I stepped toward him, with my hand low, not in a fist, just ready. I caught his wrist midair twisted and drove my shoulder forward. His phone flew from his hand and smacked the deck boards with a crack. "Hey!" he yelped, but he didn't finish the sentence. I pivoted using his own momentum. One smooth motion, forearm to elbow. His legs came right out from under him. He hit the porch rail on the way down, breath blasting from his lungs. The sound of his fall echoed across the yard. The big guy with the shaved head roared like a bull and charged. He wasn't fast, but he was heavy, and heavy can be just as dangerous. He swung wide-armed like a battering ram. If I'd stood still, he might have taken my head off. But I didn't stand still. I stepped right, hooked his wrist, and let his weight do the work. Marines learn early that Force beats force, but leverage beats everything. His body stumbled forward like a runaway truck with no brakes, and I guided him past me. He went face first into the dirt, a cloud of dust rising around him. He choked and spat. Son of a... Before he could finish, I planted a knee between his shoulder blades. Not enough to break anything, just enough to remind him he wasn't driving this bus anymore. The third man, the one at the barn gate, froze. His hand dropped from the chain. He stared across the yard at his buddies sprawled out like fallen fence posts. For a long second, he didn't move. Funny thing, fear. Does it stops people like a stun grenade? His boots stayed rooted in the dirt. Karen finally snapped out of it. "Stop! Stop!" she shrieked, voice cracking like thin glass. "You can't touch them. They're authorized personnel." I looked at her, still calm, still steady. "No, ma'am," I said. "They're trespassers." "You assaulted them," she screamed. "They tried to force their way into my home," I replied, lifting my knee off the big guy's back and stepping away. "And you told them to proceed." The tall guy on the porch groaned, rolling onto his side. The big guy finally pushed himself upright, spitting dirt from his mouth. The third man, suddenly remembering he had legs, took a cautious step backward, then another, then he broke. He bolted toward the SUV like a deer hearing the first crack of hunting season. He fumbled with the door, practically falling into the vehicle. The engine revved hard, tires spun. Karen spun on him. "Do not leave. We are not finished here." But she didn't have control anymore. She never did. She just thought she did. The big guy staggered to his feet, glaring at me like I'd insulted his ancestors. His left arm hung wrong, nothing broken, but nothing working right either. He took one step toward me, testing his chances. I didn't raise a fist, didn't raise a voice. I just stared him down with the same look I'd used on recruits who thought they were 10 feet tall and bulletproof. He stopped. His jaw tightened. His eyes dropped. That's when Karen exploded. You are done. Do you understand me? You assaulted my staff. You resisted inspection. This is illegal. You're going to jail, mister. And when the county hears about what you enough, I said calmly. She froze, shaking with fury. This is private land. You came uninvited. You ordered your men to open my barn, step onto my porch, and film inside my home. That is not... It's all on video, I said. Gate cam, porch, cam, barn, cam, every second. Her face drained of color. The tall guy on the ground groaned again. The big guy clutched his arm. The SUV's tires kicked up dust in the distance as the third man fled the scene entirely. And in that moment, in that quiet stretch of air between threat and consequence, I realized something important. They hadn't come here to inspect anything. They came to intimidate me. They came to push me. Maybe even to provoke me. They just didn't expect to be the ones lying in the dirt. Karen trembled, pointing her tablet at me like it was a weapon. "You're finished," she spat. "When I'm done with you, you won't own a single inch of this land." I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just said, "Ma'am, you need to leave right now." And for the first time all morning, she actually listened. But this wasn't over, not even close. Because when people like Karen lose control, they don't retreat. They regroup. The trouble hadn't left my land that morning. It had simply changed shape. Karen stood there, trembling, her tablet raised like she thought it could stop a man who'd spent years being trained for situations far worse than arguing with HOA bullies. The two guys on the ground groaned, trying to gather themselves, but the fight had drained right out of them. The third one was gone, long gone, dust trails still hanging in the air like a reminder. For a moment, everything went oddly still. The horses behind me had quieted, the breeze slowed. Even the morning birds seemed to pause. That kind of silence only shows up right before a decision gets made. And in my bones, I felt theirs coming. Karen's breathing was sharp, uneven. She jabbed her shaking finger at me. "You've assaulted my staff," she said, voice breaking. "I will have you removed from this property by force if necessary." "Ma'am," I replied, "you can't remove a man from land he owns." "You think this is your land?" she shouted. "We have expansion rights, a buffer zone, zoning influence. We will absorb this area, and you will comply with the transition." Her voice cracked like something inside her finally snapped. I took one slow step onto the porch toward the wooden cabinet tucked beside the doorframe. The porch cam above me tilted its motion sensor, tracking my movement. "You stay where you are!" Karen yelled. The tall man on the porch groaned again, clutching his side. I didn't answer her, didn't have to. I opened the cabinet. Inside sat three things: a coil of rope, a dented toolbox, and my old 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, oiled, polished, and waiting like an old friend who never forgets a promise. Not pointed at anyone, not brandished, just present. I lifted it gently, respectfully, muscle memory doing the rest. The moment my hand wrapped around that walnut stalk, Karen's expression changed. All the arrogance, all the smugness, all the phony authority gone. And when I worked the pump, checked the sound echoed across the entire yard. There's a reason folks say that's one of the most feared sounds in America. The big guy with the shaved head froze mid-step. The tall guy quit trying to stand. Even Karen's tablet dipped an inch, her hand, suddenly unable to hold it steady. Her voice shrank into a whisper. You can't. You're threatening us." "No," I said firmly. "I'm protecting what's mine, and I'm making sure nobody here does anything stupid." I held the shotgun low-angled safely toward the ground finger, nowhere near the trigger. Every movement slow, controlled. Sheriff deputies have known me for years, and they'll tell you, I don't do recklessness. I don't wave guns around. I don't escalate unless I have no other option, but I also don't back down. Karen blinked rapidly, mascara already smudging. This is an act of violence. "It's an act of warning," I corrected, "one I hope you take seriously." The big guy shuffled backward, clutching his injured arm. Let's just go," he muttered. Karen whipped her head toward him. "No, we finished the inspection." "There is no inspection," I said. "Not today, not ever, not here." She opened her mouth to argue, but then she looked at the shotgun again, and she closed it. The tall man struggled to stand. The big man helped him toward the SUV. Their boots left crooked tracks in the gravel. Karen hesitated, torn between pride and survival instinct. But pride only takes you so far when reality is staring you down. She backed away slowly, one shaky step after another, her face twisted into something between fury and fear. "You'll regret this," she hissed. Her voice was thin, weak, not at all like the woman who arrived earlier. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The SUV door slammed shut. The engine revved. The vehicle peeled away, fishtailing through the pines like a scared animal. And just like that, the yard was quiet again. The horses began grazing. A hawk cried overhead. The world returned to normal, almost because deep inside where instinct lives, I knew the truth. People like Karen don't retreat. They reload. They regroup. They come back. The shotgun hadn't ended anything. It had only drawn the real battle lines. I stood there on the porch for a long moment after the SUV disappeared behind the pines. Shotgun still in my hands, the air settling slow and heavy around me. The horses calmed first, always a good sign. Then the wind returned, brushing through the tall grass, like nothing had happened at all. But something had happened, and I knew better than to think it was over. So, with the same calm I used overseas. When things went sideways, I lowered the shotgun, placed it back in the porch cabinet, and shut the door. Then I made the call not to escalate, not to get revenge, just to put things on record. "Lassen County Sheriff's Office," the dispatcher answered. "Yes, ma'am, this is Russell Drake," I said. 3 unidentified individuals and 1 female entered my property without permission. There were threats, attempted forced entry, and 2 are injured, but not life-threatening. Her tone sharpened. "Units are on the way. Stay where you are." "I'll be right here," I replied, and I was. 15 minutes later, long before the dust of the HOA's retreat fully settled, I heard another familiar sound, strong, steady, and welcome. The growl of a sheriff's cruiser on gravel. Another followed behind it. 2 sets of tires, 2 engines, 2 radios humming. This time I didn't feel tension in my gut. This time I felt the kind of relief only law-abiding folks can appreciate. The first cruiser came to a stop facing the porch. The driver's door opened and out stepped Deputy Bill Myers, a man I'd known for years. Quiet type, patient. Good eyes, good heart. He nodded at me as he adjusted his belt. "Morning, Russ," he said. "Heard you had yourself a situation." "You could call it that," I answered. The second deputy went straight to checking the 2 injured men, now sitting miserably in the dirt near the driveway. They were bruised, dusty, and humbled. The tall one still had trouble catching his breath. The big one cradled his arm like it belonged to someone else. Karen. She wasn't far. She'd gotten out of the SUV again. Must have told the driver to loop around after they'd regrouped. She marched toward Myers like a storm wrapped in polyester. "Officer," she shouted, "arrest him. He assaulted my staff, interfered with a lawful compliance inspection, and brandished a weapon." Myers didn't even look at her at first. He kept his eyes on me. "You got footage?" he asked. I pointed toward the porch camera, the barn camera, and the gate cam. 3 angles all recording, all clear. He nodded and finally turned to Karen. She thrust her tablet toward him. "We were performing an authorized HOA inspection under the expansion and buffer zone." "That zone doesn't exist," I said mildly. Karen ignored me. "And he attacked my team without provocation. We expect immediate arrest and removal." Myers stared at her for a long, silent beat. "Ma'am," he finally said, "you got any permits or court orders to be on this property?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she thrust the tablet forward again, tapping rapidly. "We have documentation planning notes, internal memos. There's an outline." "No permits," Myers repeated. Karen's face turned red. He sighed. "All right then, let's see the video." I played the footage from my phone directly to him. The SUV rolling past the no trespassing sign, the men stepping out, Karen ordering them to proceed. One man rattling the barn gate, another stepping onto my porch, the attempted forced entry, and finally the whole scuffle clean and clear. Myers whistled low. "Well," he said, "that's pretty straightforward." Karen lunged forward, voice shrill. "He attacked them. This is edited. It's incomplete." Myers held up a hand, calm as a mountain. "Ma'am, I've known Russ a long time. If he wanted these boys hurt, they wouldn't be sitting upright right now." Karen gasped. "Are you threatening me?" "No," he said evenly, "but you should feel lucky he's a Marine with discipline." And then he delivered the line that shut her down so hard I could almost hear her jaw click. "If it had been anybody else out here, ma'am, you might not be standing on your own 2 feet right now." Silence a heavy one. The big guy swallowed hard. The tall guy looked away. Karen's tablet dipped an inch. Myers continued. "From what I see, your team trespassed, attempted forced entry, and ignored clear verbal warnings. That's on you." "This is outrageous," Karen barked. We are acting under HOA authority." "Not on his property, you're not," Myers said. "HOA rules stop where his fence line starts." The second deputy returned. IDs checked. No permits, no warrants, nothing authorizing them to be here. Myers nodded. "Call the medics. Get these 2 checked out." Karen sputtered. You are making a mistake. A huge mistake. I will file complaints. I will..." "Ma'am," Myers said, climbing back into his cruiser. "You do whatever you feel you need to." He tipped his hat toward me. "Russ, I'll file the report. Keep your cameras running. Folks like this don't quit easy." "I know," I said. "Thanks, Bill." Karen stomped away, furious and humiliated, shouting into her tablet like it could save her. But she didn't look powerful anymore. She looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen her. And as her SUV sped off again, spraying gravel in her wake, one thing settled in my chest like a cold truth. The sheriff had left, but the war hadn't. Karen wasn't done, not even close. For about a week after the sheriff left, things went quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet in that uneasy way a forest gets before a lightning storm. I went about my routine, feeding the horses, checking the fences, patching the back corner of the barn where a windstorm had loosened a board. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. That's something you learn as you get older. Trouble has a smell to it, a kind of weight in the air. And one morning, I stepped out to find that weight waiting for me at the front gate. My mail carrier had left a thick certified envelope wedged between the slats. Heavy stock stamped with a law office seal, big enough to be a warning by itself. Kemp and Doyle attorneys for the Silver Creek Ranch Homeowners Association. I didn't open it right away, didn't need to. I could already feel the storm breaking through the paper. Instead, I leaned on the fence post and stared out toward the ridge. The same ridge where Karen's people had driven down from the morning they trespassed. The hills were glowing gold under the morning sun, and for a moment I wondered if life would have been easier if I'd just ignored them, let them rattle my gate, pretend they had authority. But then I remembered the tall guy reaching for my doorknob, the big guy yanking my barn chain, Karen announcing she could integrate my parcel like she was the governor. "No, some lines you protect, no matter the cost." I finally tore open the envelope. Inside were 4 pages of accusations written in the sharp, cold tone lawyers use when they want to sound official, but not human. They accused me of aggravated assault, interfering with lawful inspection, emotional damages, obstructing regulatory compliance, and my personal favorite, visual sabotage of community aesthetics. I actually laughed out loud at that one. A man can only take so much nonsense before humor becomes a survival tool. But the laugh didn't last long, because on page 3 was a printed screenshot from my own security footage. The tall guy lying on my gravel, clutching his ribs, lenses catching sunlight just right. Underneath it, bold text read, "The defendant humiliated the HOA staff with intentional public imagery." Well, hell. They were really trying to turn this thing inside out. I folded the papers up, slid them back into the envelope, and headed for the porch. Pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in a while. Julia Rich. We'd served on the same base years, back when she was still in JAG. Sharp, fearless, better at paperwork than I ever hoped to be. These days she ran her own firm and helped veterans stuck in messy land disputes. She answered on the second ring. "Russell Drake." She said, her voice warm but alert. "What kind of trouble are you calling me about?" "HOA trouble," I said. She groaned. "That's the worst kind. You're telling me?" I told her about the trespass, the scuffle, the sheriff, the lawsuit. She listened without interrupting. Another thing I liked about her. When I finished, she said, "All right, cowboy, let's not just win this thing." She paused. "Let's tear it out at the roots." That was the first moment I felt the knot in my chest loosen just a little. Because if there's one thing better than a Marine in a fight, it's a Marine with a lawyer who enjoys fighting. Julia texted me a list of documents she needed. Deed copies, zoning maps, old auction papers, footage, timestamps, every post or message Karen had made about me. I uploaded it all before sunset. She called again the next morning. "Your land was never in any HOA jurisdiction." She said, "Not even close. What they did wasn't just stupid, it might have been fraud. Give me a day." A day turned into 2. On the 3rd she called, with a tone I hadn't heard from her since we were overseas. "Russ," she said, "I found something big." That cold, heavy feeling returned, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation, because whatever she'd found, I knew it was the start of the counterattack. Julia didn't get excited easily. She was steady as bedrock, calm, under fire, the kind of woman who could cross a minefield without raising her voice. So, when she called sounding charged like electricity was humming under every word, I knew something serious had surfaced. "Russ," she said, "you need to sit down." "You." "And I'm already sitting," I replied. "Well," she said, "you're going to want to lean forward." So I did. "I pulled the zoning records for Silver Creek Ranch HOA," she continued. "Their formation documents, parcel overlays, the original GIS files, the county's archive maps, all of it. And your land was never at any point inside their jurisdiction. Not even accidentally, not even close. They'd have to cross 2 surveyed boundaries and a federal easement just to touch your fence line." I figured I said. "No, Russ, you don't understand. They knew that." She paused, letting the weight settle. "They submitted an altered zoning overlay when they formed the HOA. I blinked. "What do you mean altered?" "I mean the metadata shows the file was modified after county approval. Someone took the official map, opened it in a third-party editor, manually extended the boundaries, and re-uploaded it to their internal archive. Someone tried to make it look like your land fell under their visual buffer zone. But the county never approved that zone. They were gambling that nobody would ever check." I let out a slow exhale. "So they faked it." "Yes," she said, "and badly. Sloppy trail wrong, software signature wrong, timestamp wrong, file version. Whoever did it didn't know GIS systems leave fingerprints." I rubbed a hand over my jaw. "Let me guess who did it." "Oh, you already know," she said. "Our friend Karen." For the first time in days, I felt a flame of satisfaction burn behind my ribs. Julia continued, "This changes everything. Trespass, harassment, defamation. Those were already strong, but now we're talking about administrative fraud, possibly even criminal. What's the move?" I asked. "I've already filed the first request," she said. "Next we push for injunctive relief and declaratory judgment. Essentially, we ask the court to formally state the HOA has no authority over your land and acted maliciously. A long silence passed between us, comfortable and deadly serious. Julia broke it. And Russ, this is just the start. I'm not done digging. The next day I drove down to the courthouse to pull the original zoning maps myself, real paper copies. The kind you can hold up to the light. The clerk handed me a tube of documents that looked older than some of the houses in Silver Creek. I unrolled them on the hood of my truck. Lines, numbers, coordinates crystal clear. My land wasn't just outside HOA jurisdiction. It was explicitly listed as federal auction land, exempt from residential overlays. No buffer zone, no visual aesthetic district, no transition corridor. All lies. I rolled everything back up slow, like handling a flag, because that's what those documents felt like, the truth in black ink. Back home, I sent Julia high-resolution scans. 10 minutes later, she called again. "Good," she said. "Now I'm filing the big one." "What's the big one?" "Motion for injunctive relief plus damages." "And Russ, I'm adding something else." "What's that malicious trespass with intent to intimidate?" I whistled under my breath. "That'll rattle them." "Oh, it'll do more than rattle them," she said. "But we're not done. We still need motive. Why go this far? Why risk altering county maps?" I already had a guess. A bad one. "Expansion project," I said. Julia paused. "You think they want your land to develop?" "No," I said. "I think they already told investors they had rights to expand. And my land, well, it's in their way." Julia clicked her tongue. "That would explain Karen's behavior. Pride doesn't make people forge maps, Russ. Money does." "Yeah?" "And she slipped," Julia added. "Remember, she mentioned something about transition phases during that confrontation." I did remember. I also remembered the arrogance in her voice as she talked about visual influence zones. "You think she went ahead with plans before getting the legal green light?" I asked. "I think," Julia said. "She built an empire on a foundation she didn't own, and now cracks are showing." By evening, she'd filed the new motions. And just as we expected, Karen's attorney fired back with frantic emails, objections, and attempts to delay. Julia didn't blink. "They're scrambling," she said. "And the more they scramble, the sloppier they'll get." She was right. Because that very night long after sunset, my gate camera pinged again. Another SUV. Not the same one, but just as suspicious. It slowed, paused, then drove off, looking, watching, or maybe just reminding me that the HOA wasn't done. But they didn't know what Julia had found. They didn't know the documents were real, filed and backed by the county, and they sure as hell didn't know something else. I wasn't on the defensive anymore, not after what Julia found. The tide had turned. For the first time I could feel the momentum shifting. And Karen, she was about to feel it too. The next morning began the way they usually do out here, cold air rolling across the pasture horses, snorting softly as sunlight crept over the ridge. But inside me, something had settled, a kind of calm you only feel after deciding you're done being pushed around. Julia had filed the motions. The truth was finally moving. And the HOA, well, they were standing on the tracks. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Brace yourself. They're panicking." Julia's text read. I called her. "What happened?" I asked. "They filed a counter motion before sunrise. It's sloppy. They're trying to claim you interfered with a temporary buffer zone protocol. What made-up rule they typed up last night and backdated 2 years," she said. "And Russ, they're acting like nobody would check the metadata." I let out a short laugh. "Well, they're half right. They're desperate," she said. "And desperate people make mistakes. Their filing contradicts their own previous paperwork. They're tripping over themselves." "What's next?" I'll respond today, but I need everything. Every screenshot, every post, every message from their Facebook group. You'll have it. What neither of us knew not yet was that someone else had already beaten me to the punch. Around lunchtime, my gate camera pinged a notification. Just a delivery truck turning around. But when I walked back to check messages, my laptop screen caught my eye. Silver Creek HOA had posted something new. Right there at the top of their community page was a long, angry message from Karen. She called me unstable, dangerous, disrespectful to community harmony, said I'd assaulted peaceful inspectors, said I ran an unlicensed agricultural hazard zone. It was a smear campaign, loud, dramatic, desperate. But something was different this time. Her community wasn't clapping for her. They were replying with links, dozens of them, hundreds, all leading to the same place, a video. A video I did not upload. I clicked it. Someone had stitched together my gate cam footage professionally, cleanly showing the black SUVs rolling past my no trespassing sign, the men getting out, Karen giving orders, them rattling my barn gate, stepping onto my porch. The entire escalation exactly as it happened. No edits, no commentary, just truth from start to finish. And it was spreading like wildfire. Veterans groups were sharing it. Rancher pages, local news reporters, even a few national-level channels. Comments filled the screen. Classic illegal HOA intimidation. That man handled it better than most. Marine handshake at 2:43. Don't mess with a rancher's land. I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. Someone somewhere had my back. And 5 minutes later, I found out who. At 3:14 p.m., an email popped into my inbox. No sender name, just a message. You need to see this. Inside were 3 attachments, a PDF, a screenshot, and a text file. The PDF was explosive. It was an internal HOA memo on official letterhead written by Karen herself. The first line nearly knocked the wind out of me. We need to set a clear example. If this Russell gets away with rejecting our influence, others will follow. My jaw tightened as I read deeper. Approach dominant. Record confrontation. Push for physical escalation. She'd planned it every second. The trespass, the intimidation, the attempt to provoke me. This wasn't an inspection gone wrong. It was a coordinated attempt to corner me. The screenshot was worse. A group chat. Internal HOA messaging. 3 lines. Karen, he needs to feel outnumbered. Unknown member. Clear to escalate if needed. I stared at that screen until the numbers blurred. Then I sent everything to Julia. She called instantly. Russ, this is the break, she said. This isn't civil anymore. This is malicious intent, maybe criminal. What do? We file it. We show the judge, and then we drag the entire foundation of this HOA into the daylight. And the leak, I asked. You know who sent it. A pause then. I have a strong suspicion, she said, but I don't want to say until I confirm. I thought back to the video, the editing, the timing, the detail. Whoever sent this wasn't doing it for fun. They were doing it because something inside that HOA had cracked, and the crack was widening. Julia continued, Get ready, Russ. The next few days will move fast. How fast? Fast enough that Karen might finally understand she picked the wrong man, the wrong land, and the wrong fight. I leaned back, staring out over my fields. For the first time since this war started, I wasn't just defending myself. I was winning. And the HOA, they were starting to implode from the inside. The day after the leaked memo hit my inbox, the air on the ranch felt different. You know that feeling before a thunderstorm when the whole sky seems to hold its breath? That's what it felt like. Quiet, heavy, expectant. I fed the horses early, fixed a loose hinge on the north gate, and tried to keep my mind busy. But the truth was, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, something that would tilt the whole fight one way or the other. It came around noon. I just stepped onto the porch with a fresh cup of coffee when I saw a battered Ford pickup rolling down my driveway. Dust kicked up behind it like a tired ghost. At first, I didn't recognize the truck, but when it stopped far back nowhere near the house and the driver stepped out, I knew exactly who it was. Jeff Slade, the taller of the 2 men I'd put in the dirt. His right shoulder was taped. His face still carried bruises in purple and yellow patterns. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago, but the biggest change wasn't on his body. It was in his eyes. No swagger, no attitude, just a man who looked like he'd been carrying a weight too heavy for too long. He raised both hands slowly, palms open, not in fear, but to show he didn't mean trouble. Mr. Drake, he said, I want to talk. I didn't invite him closer, didn't have to. What are you doing here, Jeff? He swallowed hard. I'm done, he said, with Karen, with the HOA, with all of it. He shifted nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. I saw the video, he said quietly. Someone sent it to me. Then the memo, the chat logs, and I realized she's going to throw us under the bus. Already started, actually. I crossed my arms. Meaning, Jeff looked ashamed. She's telling folks everything that happened out here was our idea, that we acted without her approval, that we went rogue. He shook his head. And that's not true. You know it, I know it. Hell, half the board knows it. I stayed silent, and eventually he kept talking. "I didn't sign up for this," Jeff said. "Karen told us we were doing a simple compliance check. She said you were the type to push boundaries, that we needed to be firm." He drew a shaky breath. "Then she told us to make you feel outnumbered." Those were her words. I raised an eyebrow. "And the part about escalation." His voice cracked. "That, yeah. She said if you resisted, we should keep the pressure on. Make it look like we were documenting a violation. Make it seem like you were the aggressor. And she said she'd handle the paperwork if anything went sideways." There it was, the final missing piece. I nodded once. "You have proof." He reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a small flash drive. "It's all on here," he said. "Text, payment records, voice memos she left us. She's not careful when she's angry. She said things she shouldn't have." He held the drive out toward me. "I'm not giving this to you for revenge," he said. "I'm giving it to you because I'm not letting that woman take my freedom so she can protect her pride." I stepped off the porch, walked toward him, and took the flash drive. His shoulders sagged with relief. Then he said something that surprised me. "Mr. Drake, you didn't have to go easy on us that day." His voice softened. "And you did even when you had every right to do worse." He glanced down at his boots. "Thank you." I studied him for a moment. A younger version of me might have told him to get lost, but time teaches you something important. People can change when they see the truth. "Jeff," I said, "you've got a choice now. Stand with the truth or stand with the people who tried to ruin you." He nodded. "I already made that choice." I pointed at his truck. "Go home. Julia will contact you. She'll treat you fair." He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding that breath for a month. Before he climbed into the truck, he turned back. "One more thing," he said. "The leak, the memo, the video, that wasn't me. But someone else on the HOA board is scared, real scared, and they're trying to get ahead of Karen before she burns the whole place down." That made my stomach tighten. "Any idea who?" I asked. He hesitated. "I got a guess," he said quietly. "Board member, higher up than me, someone Karen trusts but shouldn't." He tipped his head, climbed in, and drove off. I stood there with the flash drive in my hand, listening to the fading rumble of his engine. The ranch was quiet again, but the air was different because now the HOA wasn't just panicking, it was splitting apart. And when people on the inside start running for the exits, war ends faster than you think. 3 days after Jeff handed me that flash drive, Julia called and told me the court had granted an evidentiary hearing. Not a trial yet, she said, but close. And if things go the way I think they will, it'll break the whole case wide open. So I ironed a clean shirt, polished my boots, and drove to the Lassen County Courthouse, a building older than both my parents, with steps worn smooth by generations of folks seeking justice. The parking lot was busier than usual, too busy. I saw a couple of reporters setting up cameras, a few ranchers from down the valley leaning against their trucks, even Jerry, my neighbor, nodding at me from across the lot. This about to be something he called out. "Looks that way," I said. Inside the hallway buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. The clerk kept shushing people, but nobody listened. They all wanted to see the showdown, not because of me, but because everyone in Lassen County knew the HOA had been throwing its weight around for years, and today might be reckoning day. The courtroom itself felt different, heavier attention, so thick you could chew it. I took my seat beside Julia. She wore a gray suit, clean lines, subtle, nothing flashy. But there was a brightness in her eyes I hadn't seen since the service. Karen entered 10 minutes later, and she wasn't the woman I'd confronted at my gate. Gone were the pearls. Gone was the stiff-pressed blazer. Gone was the harsh confidence. She looked frayed, hair pulled too tight, makeup uneven, her walk unsteady. Her lawyer trailed behind her like a man walking a condemned prisoner to the gallows. People whispered, the room shifted, and I knew right then that something had cracked long before we stepped inside. When the bailiff called the room to order, Judge Catherine Muller stepped in. She was a sharp woman in her mid-50s with silver hair and glasses that looked custom-built for detecting nonsense. She sat, adjusted her papers, and scanned the courtroom with a gaze calm enough to make grown men sweat. This hearing concerns the motion filed by the plaintiff, Mr. Russell Drake, regarding unlawful HOA, actions and contested jurisdiction. Counsel, you may proceed. Julia stood. With the court's permission, she began, "I'd like to begin by entering new evidence into the record. Evidence demonstrating deliberate misrepresentation of authority, coordinated trespass, and attempted provocation." The judge raised one eyebrow. "Proceed." Julia turned to the projector screen behind her. Lights dimmed, and then she plugged in the flash drive Jeff had given me. First came the memo. Karen's memo, her words, her instructions. Approach, dominant record confrontation, push for escalation, set an example. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Then Julia brought up the screenshots, the HOA chat. 3 simple messages, plain as day. Karen, he needs to feel outnumbered. Unknown, clear to escalate Karen if needed. A man in the second row gasped. Reporters' pens scratched like cicadas. Even the judge's expression hardened. Karen's lawyer jumped up like he'd been stung. Objection. These documents are unverified, unauthenticated. Julia didn't flinch. We have metadata matching, we have timestamps, we have origin files pulled directly from a device belonging to a current HOA contractor who has already submitted a voluntary statement. The judge turned slowly toward Karen. "Ms. Seaford," she said, voice low as a closing door, "would you like to address these communications?" Karen stood. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried again. I never... This is taken out of context." Her lawyer winced. Julia spoke calmly. "Your Honor, at the plaintiff's request, we would like to call a witness who can provide context." The side door opened. Jeff Slade stepped in. And if the courtroom had been tense before now, it was a powder keg. He wasn't in a suit, just clean jeans, a plain shirt, and a man's expression when he's finally tired of running. He took the oath and sat. Julia walked him through everything. The hiring, the instructions, the orders to intimidate the payment under the table, the message to escalate, the reassurance that the HOA will cover it. With every answer, Karen shrank deeper into her chair. When Julia finished, the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Slade," she said softly, "are you stating under oath that Ms. Seaford knowingly directed your team to pressure, provoke, and trespass on the plaintiff's land?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Every word of it." The judge turned to Karen. "Ms. Seaford, do you dispute this testimony?" Silence. Her eyes blinked rapidly. Her jaw trembled. I acted within my authority," she whispered. "What authority?" the judge asked bluntly. And then came the killing blow. Julia slid forward the original zoning maps, the ones untouched by Karen's edits. "Your Honor," she said, "the HOA never had jurisdiction over Mr. Drake's land. Their claim was based on fraudulent overlays submitted without county approval." The judge's eyes widened a fraction, the legal equivalent of a gasp. The courtroom erupted, shouts, whispers, reporters scrambling. Judge Mueller slammed her gavel. "Order, order." When silence finally returned, she spoke. "This court finds sufficient probable cause to pursue a full evidentiary review of the HOA's conduct, including potential administrative fraud and misuse of authority. A trial date will be set within 2 weeks. Karen's lawyer buried his face in his hands. Karen stared ahead, pale as Ash and Julia. Julia just sat down, quietly leaned toward me and whispered, "Russ, we just turned the whole damn tide." Or 2 weeks later, I walked into the courthouse, feeling like a man who'd finally reached the last mile of a long, punishing trail. The air was crisp, the sky was bright, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt steady. Not confident, not cocky, just steady. Like the earth under my boots had finally decided to stand with me. Inside the courtroom was quieter than before. Fewer spectators, fewer reporters, fewer gawkers hoping for drama. The storm had done its damage. Now people wanted to see what the cleanup would look like. Karen sat at the defendant's table, shoulders slumped, hands clasped, eyes hollow. She didn't look like the woman who drove onto my land barking orders. She looked like someone who'd finally run out of lies to hold herself upright. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't seem to hear a word. Judge Mueller entered, took her seat, and began without ceremony. "This court," she said, "has reviewed all submitted evidence, including the plaintiff's filings, the defendant's responses, recorded footage, internal, HOA communications, zoning documents, and testimony from multiple witnesses. She paused just long enough for every heartbeat in the room to sink to her silence. In light of the evidence, the court finds the Silver Creek Ranch HOA, under the authority of Ms. Karen Seaford, engaged in unlawful trespass misrepresentation of jurisdictional authority, falsification of zoning materials, coordinated intimidation, and malicious intent. Karen closed her eyes. Her lawyer lowered his head. Judge Mueller continued, her voice firm, but not unkind. The HOA's claims against Mr. Drake are dismissed with prejudice. The court grants the plaintiff compensatory damages in the amount of $220,000 jointly paid by the Silver Creek Ranch, HOA, and Ms. Seaford personally. Further, this matter is referred to the district attorney for review of potential criminal charges. A hush rippled across the courtroom. It wasn't triumph, it wasn't victory, it was relief. Clean, sharp relief that sinks into your bones. Karen didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't even cry. She just sat there staring at the table, like she finally understood the truth. Some things don't belong to you. Not land, not authority, not people, and certainly not me. When court dismissed, reporters swarmed outside, snapping photos, shouting questions. Julia answered a few, calm and composed. I kept my mouth shut like I always do. No need to swing words when the truth already hit the target. 3 days later, the county posted its official notice. Silver Creek Ranch, HOA operating license, suspended pending full administrative audit. 5 days after that, Karen's house went into foreclosure. And a week later, Jeff emailed me to say, she left town, quietly, no goodbye. I didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't feel joy in her downfall. What I felt was something simpler: closure, the kind that comes after a long fight when the dust finally settles and the land and you love stands quiet again. A month later, I stood by my front gate with Joe, the metal worker from town. We'd hauled out something heavy, 8 feet wide, 4 feet tall, thick steel letters cut with the precision of a man who takes pride in his craft. Together we bolted it into oak posts thicker than fence rails. When we stepped back, the morning sun hit it just right. Armed, trained private. This land is not for sale, not for HOA. I smiled, not a big smile, just enough to feel human again. Joe chuckled. Think that'll keep them out? Yep, I said. He paused, squinting. What's that extra line down there? I ran my finger over the small engraving at the bottom corner. Quiet, subtle. The final touch I'd requested. Not in your HOA. Joe laughed so hard he slapped my shoulder. Russ, you're a damn legend. Maybe I said tipping my hat, but at least I'm a legend on my own land. And with that, the gate swung closed. The wind brushed across the field. And for the first time in a long while, the ranch felt exactly like it was meant to. Quiet, steady mind. Let's pause and break down exactly why Russell's strategy is a masterclass in both self-defense and legal warfare. First, the no first strike rule. Notice how Russell never actually threw a punch. He used leverage and the trespasser's own momentum against them. By only responding to physical contact, he secured his claim of self-defense. Second, the undeniable paper trail. The turning point of this entire story wasn't the shotgun, it was the cameras. Having a 3-angle security system eliminated the he said, she said argument with the police. If you own property, cameras aren't a luxury, they are your best witnesses. Third, the GIS metadata trap. The biggest educational takeaway here is about property law. HOAs rely on intimidation because most people don't read the fine print. But county zoning maps are public records. Karen's fatal flaw was altering a GIS geographic information system file. Digital files leave metadata fingerprints, timestamps, and software signatures. By pulling the original physical auction records, Russell and his lawyer proved administrative fraud. The ultimate lesson: know your property lines, invest in cameras, and never underestimate the power of a good lawyer. You don't always have to fight loud to win. Sometimes you just have to fight smart.